It is my pleasure to have on the other end of our Skype connection Sheryl Connelly. Sheryl is what I guess we would call a futurist. I think her sort of official title is Global Consumer Trends and Futuring at Ford. And we had the opportunity to meet, earlier this year at the, just before the Detroit Auto Show. So Sheryl, it's a pleasure to finally have you here with us on EV World.
Well, thank you. We're excited to be here.
Well, that's great. Now, the reason we're doing this is because Ford just came out with a study that looks at trends for 2014. And so I wanted to talk about those particularly. I mean, there's some really interesting things in the report that I think people can download, and I'm sure I'll have a link from our story here to that so they can take a look at it. But I'd like to sort of go over some of those things and try to understand, first of all, kind of why does Ford, why do they take an interest in this? But let's first of all kind of give me if you will, a 10,000-foot view of what Looking Further with Ford 2014 Trends Report is all about.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, as the in-house futurist, I help with discussions regarding long-term thinking, planning, and strategy. We spend a lot of time inside Ford trying to anticipate what consumers want. Most people don't realize it takes us about 3 years to bring a vehicle to market. So even if you and I had the most ingenious idea about what vehicles, that we might build if we had, free rein in terms of product development, by the time the rubber hits the road, so to speak, those ideas might be stale, they might be obsolete, no longer relevant. So our designers, our engineers, the marketing team, they have to somehow try to anticipate what consumers want. But we know it's not simple as asking them. I mean, Henry Ford was famous for having said, if I had asked consumers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Right,
so,
of course.
One thing that we do think is helpful or informative in trying to anticipate consumer demand is to look at trends. We look in 5 arenas. We look at social, technological, economic, environmental, and political arenas because we believe fundamentally those are the 5 forces that will shape consumer demand. Okay. So we track trends in these different spaces. We track some macro trends, but we also track some micro trends. What's really exciting is that I've done the work for 10 years, and if we were having this discussion a decade ago, we would never be able to share with you any of the insights because we thought it was proprietary and too strategic to share. But last year, we found that we could give a glimpse of our trend and futuring work to the public and still keep a competitive edge. And so Looking Further with Ford, the 2014 Trends, is our second edition of the trend book. And what makes it different is that this book is global, so it has a much broader view than our previous copy.
Okay, well, that was what I was going to ask you, is how is this different? Because I didn't see the one last year for some reason. It got past me, but fortunately I was able to see this one. So I was going to ask you that how is it different? So it's more global in its extent. What sort of shifts, have the shifts been sort of subtle between what you did in 2013 as opposed to 2014, or were there sort of some fairly significant standout trends that are different this year than last?
Well, the thing as the futurist inside of Ford, I spend so much time reminding people that the trends don't change year after year. Because we're looking for things that are deep-rooted, closely held values, attitudes, and behaviors, and it takes a long time for those to change. And those are what we refer to as macro trends. But we were trying to get our pulse on the marketplace and look at things that have a shorter shelf life. We call them micro trends.
Okay.
And so these may someday grow up to be very, big macro trends and stay for the duration, but it's too early to tell. What we found when we just took the work between 2013 and 2014, going global was a huge challenge. One is that we wanted to make sure we gave insights that were universally recognized regardless of where you resided on the planet. And what we found was a lot of inherent tensions among the trends. And that's not something that we saw last year. So as I kind of go through the collection of trends for you, you'll see they tend to have contradictions in and of themselves, and we found that fascinating. And it doesn't make them any less true, it just means that some parts of the world are going to have an affinity to some trends more so than others.
Okay, well, one of those that I kind of scratched my head, and I actually had to go to Google to look this up. I had no idea what FOMO versus JOMO was, but maybe that's just because of my age. It's a little bit younger kind of a trend than I'm used to. But before we get up to discuss some of those, help me understand how this gets compiled. Is this something that you personally do? You have a team at Ford that does that? Or is this something where you've hired an outside agency to sort of work on this for you, or a combination of all of the above?
Well, I guess we're closest to all of the above. But I like to think of this work as a compilation of years of research that's been in place. And that research includes non-government agencies, academics. We partner with outside experts all the time. Though in this particular thing, in compiling it, we worked with one of our supplier partners, Brand Asset Valuators, otherwise known as BAV, and they're part of the WPP family, which is Ford. And there were actually just a handful of us, but I sat down with them and I said, here are the things that I keep bumping into in the marketplace, things that I think might be trends that are relevant. And we actually had this really fun activity where we brought in some outsiders and we called it the Angels and Assassins Workshop. So we said, here are things that we're thinking about, and tell us what resonates and what doesn't resonate. So we constantly pushed ourselves. It was an iterative process. We would bring it in-house, then we would take it out externally again, then bring it back in-house. And when we were done, we came up with these 10, and I think we have 10 really good ones.
Okay, well let's take a look and run sort of quickly through what those 10 major trends are, and kind of give me a thumbnail of what each one of them represents.
Sure. Okay, so we start with the quiet riot of innovation. And that's just this idea that we live in a time that we've almost become immune to how disruptive technology is. I mean, consider for a moment the iPad's only been on the marketplace for about 4 years. Mm-hmm. But they've become so ubiquitous to everything that we do. Small children are using them in classrooms today. And when you think about the funding sources, so you have Kickstarter, different crowdsourcing efforts, that anyone can become an entrepreneur, and then pair that with the access of technology like 3D printers, we feel like this sort of disruption, this revolution of technology is just beginning. And so I guess this trend is taking note of it, because it gets harder and harder to surprise and awe the consuming market.
Right, exactly. Well, and the 3D printing is interesting from a car manufacturer's perspective, because obviously I'm sure your engineers use that technology to sort of build models of different pieces of equipment, things like that. But there is in fact a guy that recently built an entire car using 3D printing technology. So could there be a point at which, instead of my going down to my local Ford dealership, I go to my Ford website or whoever's website and say, okay, print me up this car that I just designed, and suddenly the marketplace changes? I think that's probably a little way out there, but who knows?
Well, as a futurist, I'm trying to say that anything's possible, but I'm inclined to agree that it does feel a little way out there. I mean, because there is the component parts, but there's also the rigor of regulations and government standards, which will be much harder to monitor. But it's interesting that one of the contrasts we have, so we have this quiet riot of innovation, but in contrast to that, we have a trend called old school. And we think that in this context of rapid change, disruptive technology, uncertain economic times, and a political system that becomes increasingly globalized, that people long for a simpler, gentler, quieter time of the past. And those products that evoke that sense of nostalgia do extraordinarily well in the marketplace. For instance, Ford just released its 50th anniversary Mustang, and we were overwhelmed by the response. We knew it would be a hit, but when we look at things like Facebook and the people that were sharing their stories of their first Mustang, or how they coveted the Mustang, and they're these things, I think it's very unifying, this nostalgia approach.
Yep. Well, and you see that, I think, with a lot of different things in the area. For example, of electric bicycles, there's a trend there where people are going back to some of the older folks. I don't include myself older folk, but technically I am. that they like the old sort of cruiser, 1950s style type bicycle and things of that nature.
The beachcomber style
Yep.
one, the wider seats and the good shock absorbers. As a mom of two, I really appreciate those shock absorbers.
Right.
But even in our book, we call out a brand called Flying Pigeons, which is a Chinese-based brand that was kind of this national icon, and how it continues to be relevant and reinvents itself going forward. Let's talk about FOMO and JOMO. So you said you weren't familiar. You were familiar, you may not have been familiar with the acronym, but I'm sure you're familiar with the phenomenon. So FOMO stands for fear of missing out.
Right.
And the wonderful thing about having constant connectivity means that we have an unedited stream of information and a bountiful of choice. But it also means that we often question the decisions we make in terms of how we spend our time, who we spend it with, and where we do it. And so we find ourselves eating a meal with a fork in one hand and a phone in the other. We go into business meetings and we very discreetly put our laptop down below the table surface so we can kind of still stay connected.
Right.
And when we sit down to watch television, we do it with a laptop or a tablet, and we're still streaming other information.
Guilty.
So you index very high on FOMO. So it's the fear of missing out. So I want to know what else is going on. I want to know if there's a better opportunity out there. Now, this idea, I think, is not necessarily new. Anyone who's found themselves at the wrong place on New Year's Eve knows it. You know, it's that feeling like the day after New Year's Eve and everyone says, oh my God, you missed the best party.
Right.
I simply in high school was always at the wrong party on New Year's Eve. But in the context of social media and us showcasing what a wonderful time we have, or the meal that we're having, or who we're hanging out with, or what celebrity we just spotted, it gives a sense of anxiety that, oh, I should have made a better decision with my time.
Right.
Now that's one end of the spectrum. We are trying to highlight the tension between the other end of the spectrum, and that's the joy of missing out, and those people who are taking back their time. I love to say that one of the greatest pieces of modern day propaganda was telling us that these devices were going to save us time. Our cell phones, the laptops, they actually consume our free time. The boundary between business and professional versus your personal and private life is completely obliterated.
Yep.
So the joy of missing out is for people like you and I that are saying enough is enough. I want to reset my priorities. I want to make sure that I'm present and engaged with the people that are in front of me, the things that matter most to me. So I don't think that we live in a time that we can be single-minded and one or the other, but I think we're mindful of trying to carve out time so that we do have that joy of missing out, which gets to one of our other trends, which calls the micro moments. So micro moments is how that we try to do small little tasks and pack them into our day so that we can free up enough free time at the end of the day. This is why that we do, when we're standing in line at the bank, we're answering emails. It's why we watch television and we try to clear out our inbox and take care of other things so that at the end of the day, we return to ourselves. We take that yoga breath.
Right, right.
You know?
Well, one of the ones that I found was interesting was the stratosphere. And how stratosphere, how that's changing, because I think